I stared at the ruins of my sanctuary. 20 minutes ago, this was a climate-controlled restoration studio in downtown Portland, Oregon, a place of silence and precision, where I brought 18th century oil paintings back to life. Now it looked like a recycling depot after a flood. Cardboard boxes stamped with the logo of a discount wellness brand were stacked nearly 6 feet high, blocking the fire exits. Packing peanuts coated the concrete floor like toxic snow. And there, sitting on a $62,000 Persian rug I had spent 4 months restoring thread by thread, was my older sister, Megan. She was eating a cheesesteak. A ribbon of grease slid off the wrapper and soaked directly into the silk pile. My name is Evelyn. I work with fragile things for a living. But as I watched Megan lick her fingers and wipe her hands on her leggings, I knew nothing in this room was safe. Mom said it was fine, Megan said, chewing loudly. She said I needed space for my business, and you're never even here anymore, so we moved in. If you don't like it, call the cops. She laughed, a small, careless sound that echoed against the concrete walls. She thought she was untouchable. She thought family was a spell that erased consequences. She was wrong. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to know who's here with me. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't give her the reaction she was waiting for. My work demands stillness. One uncontrolled movement can ruin a painting forever. And right now, my life was the surface I had to preserve. I'm an art conservator. My world runs on chemistry, patience, and restraint. I work with solvents that can dissolve pigment or burn skin on contact. I understand that some damage can be reversed, and some decay has to be cut out completely. Megan was decay. She was watching me carefully, waiting for the explosion. That's how narcissists operate. They feed on emotional output. Rage, tears, pleading, any reaction confirms their power. If I raised my voice, she would cry. If I confronted her, she would call our parents. If I defended myself, she would become the victim. So I gave her nothing. I looked past her and began cataloging the damage the way an insurance assessor would. Blocked exits, food waste near archival materials, unauthorized commercial activity. This was no longer a family issue. It was a list of violations. There is a psychological technique called the gray rock method. You make yourself boring, neutral, unresponsive. You don't argue, you don't explain, you observe, you document. I met her eyes. Her smirk flickered when she realized I wasn't angry. I was empty. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay?" "That's it," I repeated. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it with a quiet, deliberate click. Behind me, I could hear her laughing, probably texting our mother that I had folded, that I was weak. She thought I was leaving to cry. I was leaving to dismantle her world, legally, quietly, and without apology. 2 weeks earlier, I should have seen this coming. It was a Sunday dinner at my parents' house outside Salem, one of those obligatory meals that feels less like family time and more like a negotiation where everyone's armed with guilt. I had come with good news. I had just secured a contract with a private museum consortium in Boston to restore a collection of flood-damaged portraits. It was the break I'd worked toward for over a decade. The project required capital, about $280,000 to set up a secondary lab. I had a plan. I would rent out my Portland loft. It was a rare property, reinforced floors, controlled lighting, biometric security. On the executive rental market, it could easily bring in $17,000 a month. I laid out the numbers between the roast chicken and the mashed potatoes. For a moment, I thought they might be proud. Then Megan spoke. "Oh, perfect," she said, looking at our mother. "That fixes my storage problem." Megan sold supplements. Not pharmacy supplements, the kind sold through private messages and live streams, promising clarity, wealth, and transformation. She called herself a founder. I called it a pyramid. She had inventory stacked in her garage and decided my studio was the solution. I can move the product in next week, she said casually. It'll save me storage fees, and the address will look amazing on my website. I laughed. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. My mother put down her fork. That's actually a wonderful idea, she said. You'll be traveling anyway. Your sister just needs support. It's the right thing to do. I looked at them. I looked at the income I needed to fund my future, and I realized they were asking me to sacrifice it so Megan wouldn't feel uncomfortable. There's an economic principle called the sunk cost fallacy. It's when someone keeps investing in a losing bet because admitting failure would be too painful. My parents were gamblers. Megan was their bad bet. They had poured decades of money, excuses, and emotional labor into her. Failed degrees, failed marriages, failed businesses. Admitting she wouldn't succeed meant admitting they were wrong. So instead, they looked at me, the stable one, and saw fresh capital. I was the collateral they were willing to burn. No, I said calmly. The loft is a business asset. I already have tenants. My father slammed his hand on the table. You're selfish, he said. Your sister is drowning and you're building a yacht. I left early. I thought saying no was enough. I forgot that to gamblers, a no is just a bluff they haven't called yet. The timeline brings us back to that morning, 20 minutes before I found Megan eating over my rug. I stood in the hallway outside my loft, adjusting my blazer. Beside me was Ryan, the private security manager of the building, and the Whitfields, a senior executive couple relocating from Denver. They were ideal tenants, impeccable credit, quiet, art collectors. They had already wired a deposit based on photographs alone. The light in the main gallery is northern exposure, I told Mrs. Whitfield, perfect for consistent illumination without UV damage, and the climate system is medical grade. I was selling them order. I put my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned and tried again. The mechanism felt sticky, wrong. I apologized and knocked. No answer. Just the muffled sound of a TV and heavy movement inside. Ryan stepped forward. Let me try the master override. He entered the code, and the lock disengaged with a dull clunk, and the door swung open. The smell hit first. Not varnish or oil or clean air. Stale fast food, sweat, cheap perfume. Then the sight. My breath caught. The loft had been turned into an assembly floor. Megan's 3 children, ages 7 to 11, were sitting cross-legged on the concrete, stuffing plastic supplement bottles into shipping boxes. They looked exhausted, but what stopped my heart wasn't the child labor. It was where they were sitting, 3 feet from my chemical storage rack. Art conservation requires volatile substances, acetone, industrial solvents, compounds that can ignite or poison if mishandled. I kept them sealed in fire-rated cabinets. The doors were wide open. A solvent bottle sat on the floor beside a juice pouch. One spill, one spark, this building could become a toxic furnace. Mrs. Whitfield covered her mouth. This is not as described, Mr. Whitfield said quietly. They didn't wait for an explanation. They backed toward the elevator and disappeared. That was $480,000 in projected rental income evaporating in silence. Ryan turned to me, pale. Evelyn, is that acetone next to a child's drink? Yes, I said. That was the moment it stopped being personal. This wasn't family conflict. It was negligence, endangerment. A liability that could bankrupt me and put me in prison if a child was hurt. Megan looked up from the couch, annoyed that her show had been interrupted. "Oh, you're back," she said. "You should have called first." The elevator ride down felt endless. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally choosing myself. My phone vibrated nonstop in my pocket. I didn't check it. I already knew. My mother, my father, excuses disguised as concern. Ryan glanced at me as the doors opened into the quiet lobby. "Are you calling your parents?" "No," I said. "They'll tell me to apologize." I pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls. Then a notification. Megan had posted a video. A full tour of my loft. "Check out my new office," she chirped, panning across the skyline. "Big things coming. Manifesting abundance works." She was claiming my life as her success, using my sanctuary as a stage. I closed the app. I thought about the solvents, the children, the boundaries she had erased. "She told me to call the police," I said to Ryan. "What?" "She told me if I didn't like it, I should call the police. She thinks I won't. She thinks I'll keep the peace." My thumb hovered, then pressed the numbers. 911. I reported a trespassing in progress at my property. Unauthorized occupants, hazardous chemicals present, unsupervised minors. I spoke in facts, not feelings. When the officers arrived, I met them with my deed and my identification. We went upstairs. Megan screamed when she saw the uniforms. "I live here," she yelled. "My mom said I could." The officer looked at her. "Does your mother own this property?" "No." "Then her permission is irrelevant." I watched Megan's confidence collapse. For the first time, guilt and tears didn't work. The law didn't care about her intentions. It only cared about ownership. As the officers escorted her toward the elevator, Ryan touched my arm. "Evelyn," he said, "where are the antique chairs?" I turned toward the corner of the room. It was empty. 2 original 18th century velvet chairs I had been restoring were gone. They were worth over $14,000. "Maybe she moved them," I said, though my stomach had already sunk. Ryan turned his tablet toward me. A listing, posted an hour ago. "Antique chairs, must sell today, $500. The seller was Megan. The cold hardened into something solid. She hadn't just crossed a boundary, she had committed a crime. "Officer," I said, "I need to add a charge." I showed him the screen. Grand larceny. Megan tried to explain. Borrowing, temporary, future repayment. "That's not how theft works," the officer said, pulling out his cuffs. This wasn't a family issue anymore. It was a felony. By the time my parents arrived at the station to collect the children, Megan was being processed. They stormed into the waiting area like a weather front. My mother's face was red and swollen from crying. My father looked like he wanted to hit something. "Drop the charges," my mother screamed, pointing at me. "She's your sister. How could you do this to your own blood?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I reached into my bag and pulled out a document I had prepared while waiting. It was an invoice. "This is a bill," I said, handing it to my father. "Professional biohazard cleaning of the loft, disposal of unauthorized materials, restoration of the damaged rug, and full market value for the stolen chairs." His hands shook as he read it. "You're dead to us," he said. "Good," I replied. "That means you can't ask me for money anymore." I turned and walked out into the cold Portland night. I was alone. I had no family, and I had never felt more free. 6 months have passed since that night. I'm sitting in a small cafe in Cambridge, Massachusetts now, watching rain slide down the windows in clean, orderly lines. My phone is on the table, face up, silent. The Portland loft was rented 3 weeks after the incident. I hired a specialized remediation crew, the kind that handles hoarding and crime scenes, to erase every trace of Megan's occupation. It cost me $5,200, worth every cent, to exercise obligation. The Whitfields came back. Ryan explained everything. The squatter was removed, security upgraded, codes changed. They signed a 2-year lease and paid the full $17,000 a month up front. That capital allowed me to open my East Coast studio early. I don't speak to my parents. I don't speak to Megan. I do speak to my Aunt Linda. She called yesterday with an update. Megan pled guilty to grand larceny to avoid jail time. She's on probation, permanent record. Her brand collapsed the moment her mugshot circulated. No legitimate landlord will rent to her. She lives in my parents' basement with her children. My parents drained their retirement savings to cover her legal defense. The sunk cost fallacy finally collected its debt. They kept betting until the house took everything. Linda told me they complain about me over dinner, about how ungrateful I am, how I abandoned the family. I listened and felt nothing. No guilt, no anger. I used to think sanctuary was a place, a controlled environment, expensive locks, perfect lighting, but I was wrong. Sanctuary is a boundary. It's the ability to say no without justification. It's refusing to burn yourself to keep others warm. Blood is biology. Family is behavior. I finished my coffee and stood up. I have my work. I have my self-respect. And I have the keys to my own life. I am never making copies again. Most people scroll past stories like this. The ones who subscribe are the ones trying to change something inside themselves. If this made you stop scrolling, subscribe, comment, and share it with someone you love who needs permission to walk away.